Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Mysterious Mondays. Tattooed Biker here with you, and tonight I have something really interesting in store for you. Over the past few weeks, I've received an overwhelming number of emails from our viewers, sharing spine-chilling encounters with mysterious creatures and unknown cryptids. From eerie forest encounters to unexplained beings just lurking in the dark. So, without further ado, let's ride into the unknown. Number 1. Dear Biker, I was catching up with a childhood friend the other day, and he brought up an encounter we had years ago that I haven't thought about in a while. But remembering it, I thought I would share. We were 12 and playing manhunt with our friends late at night. We lived in a heavily wooded area in New England, and had created a fairly extensive network of trails that went pretty deep into the woods over the years. Since it was pitch black in those woods, we would run around with flashlights, only turning them off to hide from the hunters. One night, my friend was chasing me down one of the trails with his flashlight on and mine's off, in hopes I could slip behind a tree to evade him. At an intersection of two trails, I made a sharp left down a trail we had just recently added to our network, and was almost immediately met by what I initially thought to be another hunter. I tried to make a sharp cut off the trail to evade the second hunter, but slipped and got tagged out by the initial hunter. As I was getting up, I looked to see who the other hunter was, who cut off my escape, and then quickly realized that it was none of my friends. The creature, looking back at us, stood on four legs, towering over us at about 7 feet tall, with its front legs longer than its hind legs, which also seemed to be bent backwards. It was completely devoid of hair of any kind, and its skin was pale, almost a green hue, almost like it was decaying. Its eyes glowed yellow in the light of the flashlight, with a face that seemed almost human in an uncanny way. Both my friend and I stood frozen for what felt like an hour before sprinting out of the woods as fast as possible, not looking back even once to see if we were being pursued. After that encounter, neither of us dared enter those woods for a solid month. Now, my initial thoughts is that we saw a deer with some sort of horrible disease, although what we saw didn't resemble any of the thousands of deer that I've ever encountered prior to that experience, nor in the decade since. I have since dug deep into cryptid sightings in that area, and again was unable to find anything that resembled the description of the creature we encountered. Does any of your listeners have any suggestions, both natural or paranormal in nature, that could perhaps help describe what we both saw that night? Signed, Anonymous. Number 2. Hey TB, I guess my encounter is about something they call the Glimmer Man. I'm from southern Ontario, Canada. It must have been about mid-July, 2018. My boyfriend and I were spending a day in Toronto at a few restaurants. Had a couple of drinks throughout the day and then decided to kind of head back to the hotel early and crash. I woke up about 5 a.m. or so. I do wake up fairly early, but not this early. As I was trying to go back to sleep, it happened that there was some light from dawn coming in from one of the windows. The curtains were drawn in the hotel room, but there was still some light coming in. I noticed that I can hear it. It was my boyfriend talking in his sleep. I looked over at him. I guess there was probably about 3 feet of space between where my boyfriend was lying on this side of the bed and the space between the wall. As I looked beyond my boyfriend, I saw a shimmering movement along the wall. As I continued to watch, I distinctly made out a humanoid form. It was kind of rocking back and forth. I didn't know what to think. Maybe I was just tired and imagining all this. Then I saw a pair of eyes manifesting on the face of this being. As I watched, the eyes turned a bright yellow color. Then the being crouched down and out of sight. Then suddenly, it popped up right beside my boyfriend. I saw a shimmering hand reach up and cover my boyfriend's face, then pulled back when my boyfriend made a gasping sound. Then it happened again. I started shaking my boyfriend, but he wouldn't wake up. The being then stood up and started walking around the bed toward my side. I immediately jumped out of bed and headed toward the bathroom. I entered and slammed the door. I kept yelling for my boyfriend to wake up, but I heard no response. Then I heard him gasping again. I opened the door and saw the being lying on my side of the bed. I stood up and watched it, again yelling at him to wake up. Then suddenly my boyfriend woke up and lets out this horrific scream. He looks at me with wide, terrified eyes. I looked over to my side of the bed, and the being was gone. My boyfriend tells me that he had this awful dream that someone was trying to smother him. I just started crying. I told him what I'd seen. At first, I don't think he believed me, but the more I talked, the more he realized that his dream was similar to what I was describing. We quickly packed our bags, checked out early, and then drove home. Since that day, my boyfriend and I married. We bought a house and planned to start a family soon. But I occasionally see the same glimmer man. I believe he hitched a ride back with us from Toronto. He isn't here all the time, but seems to show up at the most inopportune times. Can you or anyone out there tell me what to do? Can this thing be removed? Is it a spirit or a malevolent entity, or maybe even a creature of some kind? I just don't know. Signed, Lillian. Number 3. Dear Tattooed, I wanted to tell you about some things that me and my sister had seen a few months apart. The first sighting was July in 2019. I was on the phone with my boyfriend in rural Arizona. I was sitting in my truck at the time, parked facing my house to the east. With him and I, we could be on the phone till 1 when the other slept. This night it was him, and it was around 10 p.m. After I tried multiple times to wake my boyfriend up or to see if he was asleep, I hung up. After the call ended, I felt this feeling like I was going to see something scary, and I tried shaking it off. I looked behind me to the west, and towards the northwest is a lot with a giant street light in the middle of the property. In the area between the lot and my house is a ditch with some more space filling with that in the middle. But from the darkness, I saw this being come from the ditch, and in contrast with the bright background of the lot, it seemed to float and glided above the ground. The movements it made were really smooth and didn't seem to have any motor movement or jagged movement like any normal being would. I was looking at it astonished. I was seeing it because its arms weren't like normal arms. They were fluid, almost like they were tentacles. But it looked like water, and its tentacle arms moved with like a wave. The movement it glided with was very fast as well. I was super scared and never experienced anything like it. I called it the Fluid Man to my family. I still see it when I just think about it. And the second sighting was my sister's, on October of 2019. My sister, around 10 p.m. on a Friday night, went outside to get some air since the wood stove can get a little hot and stuffy when it's filled with wood and coal. She went outside and then opened the door fast to tell me to come to her, and I sat on the table across the living room and in the kitchen. When I ran over, she said the thing was gone, and that she saw something rise up from the ground, like a zombie above the ground, maybe 20 to 30 feet in the air. She made the movement of it rising from the ground in an upward motion, very exaggerated, which made it seem even creepier to me. It was in the same area as the last time, since if you go out my front door, it's looking west. She said it started flying after two people walking west on the road, going the same direction. Now, my sister is a very hard-headed, stubborn person who isn't scared of anything. She's super courageous and will do anything to keep us safe. She never shows any emotion and keeps a strong front like my dad. Her and I have a special relationship, so I've seen the real her more than anyone, and she's my best friend. However, I've never seen her that scared and alarmed before in my life. And it scared me too, because it's something that I've rarely ever seen. Both experiences were scary, and it was weird that they happened at the same place within a few months of each other. I always hope that I never have to see it again. My sister always brings it up now and then on late nights. Anyways, thanks for taking the time to read this. Signed, Rochelle. Number 4. Hey, Tattooed Biker. I've been lurking here for quite some time because cryptids, weird encounters, the supernatural, and aliens are all big interests of mine. But I do have an encounter that I'd like to get some ideas on and to share with you and your community. I think I've only shared it once in a true scary stories thread a long time ago on Reddit or somewhere. I can't remember now, but it was mostly for sharing stories. I'd be curious to see what y'all might make of it, and if anybody has any insight. This happened back between 2009 and 2011. The people in the story are myself, my ex-girlfriend, who I'll call Penny here, and a friend, who I'll call Kyle. These obviously aren't their real names. I don't feel comfortable sharing them online or mine. My mother had asked us to pick up her cat from the vet around 4 or 5 p.m. one night. As it was winter in the northern Midwest, it was getting dark around this time, and it was already a bit of a drive back and forth from the vet, because my mom lived out in the country and the vet was in town. At any rate, we went and got the cat without issue. And after we were about to drop it off, myself, Penny, and Kyle were going to see a movie. We get back to my mother's house. The sun is already set for the most part, and it's quite cold. Kyle decided to help me carry the cat inside while Penny kept the car running to keep the heater going. Kyle liked talking to my mother and wanted to see her before we headed back out to see the movie. Well, we're walking up to the house, and both Kyle and I stopped because we both got this weird feeling at the same time. We figured this out later when we were sharing notes about it. The house is in front of us, and my mother's yard is behind us. It was a big farmhouse, so it had a sprawling front yard. We both stood still. We felt frozen to the spot by this weird feeling, and I looked first and saw something standing behind us in the yard, and then Kyle looked and saw it too. The thing had to have been well over 6'3", because that's how tall Kyle is, and it was bigger than him. It had a hulking shape, with more mass on top than the bottom, like a hunchback, which just kind of tapered off into the shadows. So I don't know if it had legs or what they might have looked like. The whole thing was pitch black, even in the dark. It had no eyes, no discernible features whatsoever, as far as facial features go. But I could tell it was huge, and felt very angry for some reason. There was just a feeling that I was getting off of it, and it was mad that we were there, and I could tell it was staring right at us. The only discernible features about it were, it had these horns, like massive horns, like antlers, sticking up off its head, and the hunch in its back seemed to be lumpy and had irregular shapes sticking out of it. But because it was so dark, I couldn't figure out what it was. Neither of us heard a single sound from it. It just stood there and menaced us for what felt like minutes, but it can't have been that long. Kyle unfroze me from the spot, and the two of us darted into my mom's house and delivered her cat. We waited a bit, but after looking outside and not seeing anything out there anymore, We ran back outside and Penny jumped on the gas and we got out of there. We never saw it again after that, but to add a little background on my mother's house, I've always felt like it's haunted. The house that is standing there now is a newer build. The older farmhouse that had been there previously had burned down and killed a young boy, a mother, and her older daughter. My mother has had issues with it for a long time. She's had it blessed on several occasions, but nothing ever sticks. Friends who stay in the house have reported weird things happening to them as well. And when I lived there, I also experienced some odd things. But this was the only time that something like this has happened. The house is situated in Indiana, near the Sugarloaf Mound, which was used by the Miami natives in Indiana's prehistory. Anyways, just wanted to share. Signed, Anonymous. And there it is. All I have tonight in the realm of the unexplained. I hope you enjoyed hearing these strange and disturbing cryptid stories. They remind us all that there is so much more to our world than meets the eye. If you have a story or encounter you'd like to share, my email is in the description, so send it in, and it may just make it into a future video. So remember, until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, stay safe, and I'll be seeing you on down the road a ways. Biker.